Welcome to the Marta podcast, a sacred space of reclamation, unraveling, and in the age where loneliness and isolation are at an all-time high, also a place of deep connection to each other as well as to ourselves. As I share the intimate journey of my own life, I hope to reflect your own so that you can live more deeply and freely from a place of full alignment and authenticity. Because that is what we're here to do, to continually discover ourselves in order to fully express our sacredness, wholeness, and radiance as women. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get started. Hi, and welcome to the Marta podcast. I'm so glad that you're here. Today I wanted to share with you something that has been on my heart in regards to female friendships. Female friendships were something I really struggled with for a long time in my life. So much so that as a young girl, I found male friendships much safer. And it was because there was so much betrayal I carried in my stories of relationships with women. And, you know, the whole story of what goes on in a young girl's development in high school. During the time I was growing up, there just was so much cattiness and backstabbing and competition. And so I carried that with me into adulthood. And I think in order to protect myself, and because I didn't have the capacity or the maturity to sort of dive in and figure out what was going on, I really would say things like, I'm just so much more comfortable around guys. They just tell it how it is. And I really meant that in platonic friendships. There was no crossing boundaries there. I just was a lot more comfortable with my guy friends. Of course, looking back, I can totally relate it to me just being a lot more comfortable in my own masculine versus my feminine. There was sort of like a bad rep I gave to women. They're so needy, they nag, and all the things that I couldn't quite accept in myself, I projected onto other women and found it just intolerable. And fast forward, a couple of decades, and having done a lot of inner work around really inviting my own feminine to step forward, reconnecting to my tender heart, to my sensitivity, becoming a mother, falling in love, living through this seasonality of bearing children, having my cycle, owning the fact that I feel things heavily and that's beautiful, and that I am a sensitive and sensual being as a woman, that I am cyclical, seasonal, in sync with the phases of the moon, unlike the masculine. I really started to learn about my own feminine. And as I began to be more comfortable connected to my own femininity, all of a sudden female friendships became safer. And I started showing up in them a lot more authentically and accepting, loving, really, as I was able to recognize, accept, and connect to the female aspects in myself. I found them beautiful in other women. And because I started showing up as a safe woman versus the one who gossips and hurts and all the things that I had experienced as a young girl, I started showing up in my maturity as a woman, not as a wounded little girl. It really shifted the nature of my feminine friendships. And it's been such a beautiful journey that lately, what I've really been noticing and picking up is how much wounding there still is between women. In particular, women who are successful. And I'm going to speak to that because that is the environment or the circle that I seem to be surrounded by as someone who had several careers herself. I went to school, I studied TV production, and pretty early on, I worked in the field that I studied in the number one TV market. My dream job was to work at NBC at 30 Rock in New York City, and I got there in my early 20s. It was quite successful, top video editor for Channel 4. And so I met many successful and driven women there. And after that, my husband and I started our own business, cheapcaribbean.com. And although it really was a male-dominated field, the few women I encountered were also quite driven and successful. And now that I am, in the space of, I guess, having an online business, you would say, because the nature of it is rather broad. I wrote a book, so I'm an author. I host retreats in Paris. I host an online community for women, and I also do coaching and mentoring. But then I also do collaborations of luxury nature with various brands focused on travel, fashion, and wellness. So sort of all of that lumped in there. The one thing that it all has in common is that a lot of my business is based online. And what I'm what I'm really tapping into as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, is the way we relate to one another as women, something that is very transactional in nature. And it really bugs me because so very often I get messages from women on Instagram, on Facebook, and it's a constant thing of, someone friends you and immediately they're in your DMs trying to sell you something without looking at your profile, without knowing anything about you. There is this culture of selling. And there's also a huge wave of women really putting up very strong boundaries. My time is valuable, not everyone gets access. My pricing is my pricing. So if you want a time on my calendar, on my Zoom call schedule, you have to pay in. And I think some of it is healthy, but I think we're getting lost in the fact that the only way to have these boundaries is financial, because we're forgetting how to relate to one another as women without trying to buy or sell anything from one another. And I think what makes it really tricky is that so many of us were raised being taught that love needs to be earned. That in this dynamic of I'm going to bill you for my time, or it's a pay to play, or, the way I set boundaries is my pricing, we're replaying some of that little girl wounding. We're still trying to earn love, acceptance, validation, but now we're charging money for it. I started noticing that, and I started to looking at the way I hold boundaries with women. And some of it is healthy because you can't possibly answer every DM, and there has to be a system where you weed out some of the people. Not everyone does get access. I mean, there's a lot of people on the internet, but just looking at how clean my own energy is. For example, I have a bit of wounding around being used by other women. And I'll tell you that as someone who is financially successful, I have really learned to put up boundaries myself because it can get very icky and muddy and almost enmeshed. Hard to tell when women want to connect with you because they see the human being or they just see the money. And so a lot of times I'll be invited into collaborations or partnerships, not because I'm a good fit for it, but because the person trying to sell me on the concept knows I have the money to pay for it. And so, that whole question comes up in me is, can you see the human being behind the bank account balance? And so I've had to be real cautious because that is a wounding and I'm easily triggered in that place. And very often it also shows up in my life as someone expecting me to do them a favor, make an introduction, open a certain door. And so the thing is that it really is my heart's desire to hold doors open for women, to connect them to one another. But I always have to be discerning at where their ask is coming from, if it's clean. Because the thing I always teach my kids, my clients, the thing I've lived by is it doesn't hurt to ask. Ask. The worst thing that can happen is someone will say no. And I've noticed that I was out of alignment because while I give that advice and I myself ask, hey, may I have this? Can I get that? Could we collaborate? I very often don't feel good when someone asks it of me. And so I really had to sit with that and say, what is that? That I feel okay asking, yet when someone asks something of me, I feel used. And so cleaning that up really made me look at where is it that I'm treating women in my life as a transaction, as a way to get something, as a door that can be open versus seeing them for the heart and the soul that they are, a person and a human being. And so I've really sat with what there is still for me to look at and clean up. But at the same time, I'm extremely generous with my time. For example, I hold monthly calls, sometimes twice a month, with my online community. I am very active in our Telegram space. I pour into it from a space of generosity and overflow. And so I really, really nurture the women in my community. And just recently, we met in person and we gather twice a year, more than that, because twice a year in Europe, and then we also do it in the United States, twice a year. And anytime we do that, I don't charge them to come. It comes as a benefit of being a part of my membership. Because to me, there's nothing like sitting with other women at a table, looking each other in the eyes, feeling one another's energy, being able to lay my hand on another woman's hand or on her shoulder. Nothing will replace that for me. And I don't care how advanced technology gets. That is irreplaceable for me. That is something I highly, highly value. And so sitting with women, gathering with women, so very often I've noticed how uncomfortable we are, especially those of us who are high performing, striving, and successful, how uncomfortable we are in those situations where we get together with a group of women and the intention of the meeting isn't to network, to cut a deal, to talk about business, or to talk about our children. You know, when I sit with women around the table and I ask them to tell us about themselves without using their job or their children as a part of the description of who they are, they have a really hard time. And so really what I tend to shoot for in my online spaces and in these in-person gatherings is to remind us that it's okay to put the armor down, to allow the walls to come down, to soften our edges, and to open our hearts. Because that is the type of woman that I want to be, and that is the type of woman I want to model for other women. And when we get to being able to be with one another from this transactional, what's in it for me energy, we lose the ability to truly, authentically be ourselves and be with one another. You know, I just had a meeting with the women in my community 2 days ago. It was small, it was intimate, it was beautiful. And we sat at the Four Seasons in Paris, and I invited them to share French toast and hot chocolate with me. And it was so safe to be open, vulnerable, authentic, that next thing we knew, we blinked and we had been there talking for 4 hours, 5 of us. And the most beautiful thing happened. We came together at 11 for brunch, and then the women were asking, oh, there's a piano in the corner. When does the piano player play? And I was like, oh, not until 2:30, thinking, sorry, you won't be able to see that. Next thing you know, the piano player starts to play. It's a woman, and she plays the most tender and beautiful music, and each of us take a turn in between the conversations, in between the bites of French toast. We allow the music and the experience of being there, so open, so vulnerable, to move us to tears. Like literally each one of us at one moment was like, oh my God, this song, I love this song, or it's my favorite, or it's special. And we would pause and allow each other to have that moment of what happens when you're so fully present and so connected to your body, your senses, and yourself, that the experience you're living literally touches you at the depths of you and moves you to tears. And it was so beautiful and so nourishing for me to be able to sit there around this beautiful table and these white tablecloths and this china sparkled with gold, this music playing, the most magical scent in the air, beautiful flowers throughout the property, and be so deeply connected to myself and met at that depth my 4 other women. It was sacred. And so when we set aside seeing one another as a ticket to the next level, a door open to that thing we really want, a transaction, this for that even, and we show up purely with the intention of wanting to be fully present, authentically ourselves, truthfully expressing the essence of who we are, just because, like no agenda. And the women came, one from Germany, one from the Netherlands, one from the United States, one from France, and there was me. And this was the first time we had gathered in person. And so there were nerves, and, for many of the women, all of them, it was a big move to make it there, to show up. And when you commit to do something new, something unusual, all kinds of stories come up, and they said yes, and then they came. They kept the commitment to themselves, that yes, despite the stories and fears and negative talk that came up for them after that decision was made. And that commitment to showing up in a place that made them just slightly uncomfortable, to be in a group of strangers, really, but they knew that there was love and safety and connection that was bringing us there together. There was something to discover, to experience together in a group. And after the meeting, we took a tour of the hotel and we went down to the spa, and then each one of us went their own separate ways. I really thought to myself, when we gather together, not to network, not to make business deals, without an agenda, not to buy or sell anything, not to impress anyone, not to compete or compare, but just to be, to witness one another, to hold space, to speak from the heart, to exchange ideas, thoughts, our dreams, our hopes, our desires. We talked about what we wanted to experience next in life. It was so beautiful. When we gather in that way, I swear to God, the world heals just a little bit. Because I think that is a part of what we so much need as women. It nurtures us on a soul level. And so I think it not only heals the collective of women and sisterhood, but like the whole entire world. When the feminine can sit in its magic and not be threatened by her sister, but in awe of her beauty and radiance, because it only reflects her own. And there's nothing transactional about it. And it was so healing to hear from each one of them why they were uncomfortable coming, what made them nervous, what came up for them, and simply allow space for it and normalize it. We all have our things. We all have different ways that we reach our own edges. And can we not prevent that fear that we touch at those edges? Can we not allow that to prevent us from moving ahead with whatever it is that we're walking towards? Can we meet our own edges and then gently stretch them out a little bit more, expanding our own capacity from within, stretching ourselves into growing, becoming more, bigger, more expansive? It's that beautiful evolution and growth over a lifetime. And walking not fearless, but brave, which means you're fully aware of the fear. You feel it, but it doesn't stop you. You know you can hold it. You know you can hold yourself, and you still walk one step and then the other. And you become friends with that discomfort. And growth and healing is that. And when we can talk about that as women without projecting, without getting caught up in our wounds and triggers, but holding one another in reverence and respect and awe and love, we would get so much further as women than if our main goal was to make a shit ton of money and build legacy companies. Because when you're building them from an imbalance, from wounding, from your masculine, or from too much of your feminine, imbalance, not wholeness, you really end up hurting a lot of people along the way unknowingly. And some of it is human, right? It'll happen. But if we could just normalize talking about it, helping one another in love versus competing. It's not that I'm special and you're not, or I'm more special than you because I figured out X, Y, and Z. We all have the same capability within us. Infinite potential. Yeah, I'm special, but you are special too. We each have our own sense of magic that we're here to express and spread. We each have that power to create, to become, like to embody the sacredness that is our soul. And if we can use our relationships as loving mirrors, as loving companions, as guides we can be for one another, cheerleaders and supporters, instead of how can I get ahead of you or how can I use you to help me get ahead of you. it just would be such a different journey for women. And so I am all about that conversation. And I'm all about that way of relating to women. Wholeness, safety, being a safe woman for other women to be with. Owning my wounding, my mess, my shit. And apologizing for when it's triggered and it bleeds all over people. Like, it's human. And if all of it can be held in love and with grace, loving ourselves enough to know where strong boundaries are needed. I'm not saying we should let other people walk all over us. But having compassion for what the person on the other side of the table might be experiencing. And getting curious about how it's a mirror for us and our own journey. And coming to all of it from the space of we're not as different as we're led to believe we are. There's so much more that unites us than divides us. And can we focus on those things so that the world isn't a place of fighting, competing, and war, struggles, but it's a collaborative effort as we each try to make it, figure things out on this journey called life. And so just an invitation that I want to leave you with today, that I'm sitting with myself, is where am I still playing out the old belief of you have to earn love, and so making people jump through hoops to get to love me. Making myself perform to be accepted. Looking for validation when I know I don't need it. Where am I still living, maybe blindly or subconsciously, under that belief that love needs to be earned versus it's just our birthright, it's inherent. Something to be received, something to be. I mean, love isn't something you get, right? Love is who you are. So where are you making life and love transactional and not simply a field that we're all a part of? And if that sounds like it's far-fetched or not true, just notice where it's I'll give you this if you give me that. And ask yourself, gosh, if that's not love, then what is it? And what do I want it to be? And in what way am I being invited, called to stand for love? What does that look like in my life? And what does it mean to me? So just a little contemplation for you to sit with. As always, thanks for coming to hang out with me. Thank you for listening. And if this brought up anything for you, I'd love to hear from you. And just wanted to wish you a gorgeous day. And I look forward to speaking with you next time. Take care. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you resonate with this message, or if you have a topic you'd like me to discuss in a future episode, I would love to hear about it. Send me a message on Instagram at Marta Hobbs. If you'd like to move more deeply in a community of like-minded, soul-led women, please join me in mine. It's called Come Closer. And if someone in your life would benefit from today's episode, I would love it if you send it along to them. Just click share in your podcast app and text it to a friend. Finally, I would be so grateful if you'd rate and review the Marta Hobbs podcast in your favorite podcast app. Your support will help this show find the women who need it. Thanks so much for sharing your time with me today. Until next time, I'm sending you all my love. Take care.